The amber glow of my desk lamp cast long shadows across the stack of financial documents I'd been reviewing for the past 6 hours. My name is Dr. Veronica Hale, and at 39, I'd spent 14 years building a reputation as one of the most meticulous compliance and risk management specialists in corporate America. Tonight, that reputation was about to be tested in ways I never imagined. I pushed my glasses up the bridge of my nose and leaned back in my leather chair. The familiar creak, a small comfort in the otherwise silent offices of Integra Trust Holdings. The 42nd floor of our Manhattan headquarters offered a spectacular view of the city lights, but I barely noticed anymore. What held my attention was far more compelling than any skyline. The numbers didn't lie, they never did. Integra Trust Holdings wasn't just any financial firm. We managed infrastructure investments worth billions, partnering with state and federal governments on projects that shaped communities across the nation: bridges, hospitals, water treatment facilities, the unglamorous but essential backbone of modern society. It was work that mattered, which is why I joined the firm 5 years ago, leaving behind a lucrative position at a Wall Street giant for something with more purpose. But purpose, I was learning, could be corrupted as easily as anything else. The elevator chimed softly, and I heard footsteps in the hallway. Security making rounds, most likely. I glanced at my watch, 11:47 p.m., another late night, but this one was different. This one would change everything. I returned my attention to the screen, where a complex web of transactions sprawled across multiple spreadsheets. To the untrained eye, it might look like standard corporate financial management, but I'd been trained by the best, first at Yale Law, then through years of navigating the Byzantine world of SEC regulations. I knew what clean books looked like, and these weren't clean. Shell companies, the breadcrumbs were subtle, but they were there. Offshore accounts in the Caymans. Transfers timed to coincide with quarterly reporting deadlines. Money flowing in circles, always landing back where it started, but somehow growing larger with each revolution. It was elegant in its complexity. I had to admit, someone had put serious thought into this architecture of deception. That someone, I was beginning to suspect, was our new CEO. Cameron Bryson had swept into Integra Trust 6 months ago, like a hurricane wearing an Armani suit. Young for a CEO at 45, he came from the fast-paced world of fintech startups, where the motto seemed to be, move fast and break things. The board had been dazzled by his track record of explosive growth and his promises to modernize our staid, careful approach to business. We need to be more agile, he'd announced at his first all-hands meeting, pacing the stage like a motivational speaker. Less process, more progress, less red tape, more green lights. The staff had applauded. Even I had been cautiously optimistic. Change wasn't always bad, and Integra Trust could certainly benefit from some fresh thinking. But there was fresh thinking, and then there was this. I pulled up another document, this one showing a series of infrastructure contracts we'd recently won. The bid amounts were suspicious, just low enough to beat the competition, as if someone had inside information about what others were offering. The profit margins were razor thin on paper, but somehow, our quarterly reports showed record earnings. Magic money, that's what we called it in the compliance world when profits appeared from nowhere. My phone buzzed. A text from my assistant, Maya, who'd left hours ago. Still there? Don't forget to eat something. Chinese place on 48th delivers late. I smiled despite myself. Maya was 26 and treated me like I was her absent-minded professor mother rather than her boss. But she was right, I'd skip dinner again. I was about to close my laptop and call it a night when one more file caught my eye. It was labeled innocuously enough, Q3 maintenance allocations, but the file size was wrong. Too large for what should have been a simple spreadsheet. I opened it. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just financial fraud. This was a systematic diversion of funds from critical infrastructure maintenance. Money allocated by the government for bridge repairs, hospital upgrades, water system improvements, it was being siphoned off into the shadow network I'd been tracking. We weren't just stealing money. We were stealing from the safety and well-being of millions of Americans. My hands trembled slightly as I began taking screenshots, saving everything to an encrypted drive. This was beyond anything I'd suspected. This was criminal negligence on a massive scale, wrapped in a bow of securities fraud. I thought about the bridge collapse in Minnesota years ago, the water crisis in Flint, the hospital in Louisiana that had lost power during a hurricane because their backup generators hadn't been properly maintained. How many of those tragedies could have been prevented if the allocated funds had actually been used as intended? The office suddenly felt very cold. I knew what I had to do. There were protocols for this, channels to go through. First, I would compile a comprehensive internal report, present it to the board, let the company address it internally before involving external authorities. That was the proper way, the professional way. But as I began drafting my report, a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered warnings. Cameron Bryson wasn't some mid-level manager caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He was the CEO, hired by the board, celebrated in the business press as a visionary. Would they really take the word of their compliance officer over their golden boy? I saved my work, backed it up to multiple secure locations, and finally allowed myself to head home. The security guard at the front desk looked up from his newspaper as I passed. Another late one, Dr. Hale. You know me, Marcus, married to the job? He chuckled. Just don't forget to have a life too. If only he knew that my life was about to become very complicated indeed. The next morning came too quickly. I'd managed maybe 3 hours of sleep, my mind churning over the implications of what I'd discovered. I arrived at the office early, wanting to review everything once more with fresh eyes before taking action. But I wasn't the only early bird. Veronica. Just the person I wanted to see. Cameron Bryson stood by the elevator bank, coffee in hand, looking like he'd stepped out of a CEO catalog, perfectly styled salt and pepper hair, a smile that had probably charmed its way through dozens of board meetings, and eyes that were just a little too sharp, a little too calculating. Good morning, Cameron, I managed, proud that my voice remained steady. Listen, I've been thinking. Your department has been doing great work, really top-notch stuff, but I wonder if we're not being a bit too cautious, too focused on what could go wrong instead of what could go right. I forced myself to return his smile. That's literally my job description. He laughed, the sound echoing in the marble lobby. Of course. But see, that's old thinking. In the new economy, the fast eat the slow, sometimes you have to take calculated risks. Calculated being the key word, I said carefully. His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Exactly. Which is why I want you to take a look at our Q3 reports with fresh eyes. Maybe find some areas where we can be more flexible in our interpretations, more creative in our approach. The elevator arrived, and we stepped in together. The small space suddenly felt claustrophobic. I'll certainly review everything thoroughly, I said. I knew I could count on you. He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was probably meant to be friendly but felt more like a warning. Oh, and Veronica, let's keep any concerns in-house for now. We're a family here at Integra Trust. We solve our problems together. The elevator opened at my floor, and I stepped out, feeling his eyes on my back as the doors closed. The message was clear. He knew I'd been digging. The question was, how much did he know about what I'd found? I spent the morning finalizing my report, making sure every allegation was backed by solid evidence. By noon, I had a document that would make any prosecutor salivate. Shell companies mapped out like a family tree of corruption. Fund transfers traced to their destinations. Government contracts cross-referenced with suspicious payments. It was airtight. It was damning. It was terrifying. I printed 3 copies, one for the board, one for my records, and one for my lawyer, just in case. Then I requested an urgent meeting with the board's audit committee. That's when things started to go sideways. I'm sorry, Dr. Hale, the board secretary informed me over the phone. The audit committee is unavailable for the next 2 weeks. Perhaps you could summarize your concerns in an email. An email? For evidence of fraud potentially exceeding $200 million. Right. This is urgent, I insisted. It relates to our SEC compliance and could expose the company to significant liability. There was a pause. I'll see what I can do. But Mr. Bryson has asked that all compliance matters be routed through his office first. New efficiency protocol. New efficiency protocol? Since when? I hung up and immediately checked my email. Sure enough, there was a memo from Cameron, sent that morning, restructuring the reporting hierarchy. All compliance issues now required CEO approval before being elevated to the board. He was building walls around me. But I hadn't spent 14 years in this field without learning a few things about corporate maneuvering. If the front door was blocked, you found a window. I picked up my phone and called Anders Quinn, our chief legal counsel. Anders was old school 62, methodical, and had been with Integra Trust since its founding. More importantly, he had a direct line to the board that predated Cameron's arrival. "Veronica," he answered on the second ring. "I was wondering when you'd call." "You've heard about the new protocols?" "Yes, interesting timing, wouldn't you say?" I chose my words carefully. Even internal calls could be monitored. "I have some concerns about our Q3 reporting that I think warrant immediate attention." "I see. Are these concerns of a nature that might interest external parties?" "External parties. Code for regulators. Potentially." There was a long pause. "Can you be in my office in an hour and Veronica bring whatever documentation you feel is relevant?" Relief washed over me. I wasn't alone in this. Anders's office was a throwback to an earlier era of corporate America. Wood paneling, leather-bound legal volumes, and a massive desk that looked like it could withstand a siege. He was reviewing documents when I arrived, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Close the door," he said without looking up, "and have a seat." I did both. Placing my report on his desk, he set aside what he was reading and picked it up, his expression growing more grave with each page. "Jesus Christ," he muttered about halfway through. "Excuse my language." "It gets worse," I said. He continued reading in silence. When he finally finished, he removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. "How certain are you about this?" 100%. Every transaction is documented. The evidence is indisputable." "And Cameron?" "His signature is on several of the key authorizations. Either he's complicit or criminally negligent. Neither option is good." Anders stood and walked to his window, hands clasped behind his back. "You know what this means, don't you? If we take this to the authorities, Integra Trust is finished. 20 years of building this company, gone. Thousands of jobs lost. Pension funds wiped out. If we don't take it to the authorities, people could die," I countered. "That money was meant for critical infrastructure maintenance, bridges that need repair, hospitals that need upgraded emergency systems, water treatment plants that—" "I know," he interrupted. "Believe me, I know." He returned to his desk and pulled out a document I hadn't seen before. "This is our corporate charter, Section 47, subsection 3A, the compliance oversight provision. You wrote this, didn't you?" I leaned forward to look. It was indeed my handiwork, inserted when I first joined the company. The break glass clause. "Explain it to me, in layman's terms." "In the event that internal reporting mechanisms fail or are compromised, and there's evidence of fraud or criminal activity that poses imminent risk to public safety or significant financial crimes, the Chief Compliance Officer has the authority, no, the obligation to report directly to relevant regulatory authorities, bypassing the CEO and board. If necessary, yes, it's a nuclear option, designed for exactly this kind of situation." Anders smiled grimly. "You always were thorough. I argued against this clause at the time, said it gave too much power to one person. The board overruled me. They said we'd never need it, that it was just insurance." "Well, the insurance is about to pay out?" He studied me for a long moment. "You understand that if you do this, Cameron will destroy you. He has connections, resources. He'll paint you as a disgruntled employee, maybe even suggest you planted evidence. Your career in corporate compliance will be over." "My career is the least of my concerns right now." "Spoken like someone who's never been truly tested," he sighed. "But I believe you mean it. What do you need from me?" "Legal cover would be nice, and maybe a heads up when Cameron makes his move." "You'll have both. But Veronica, be careful, and be smart. Document everything, record conversations if you have to. Build a case so airtight that no amount of political maneuvering can break it." I stood to leave, but Anders called me back. "One more thing. That provision you wrote, it's never been tested in court. We don't know if it'll hold up. You could be taking enormous personal risk for something that might not even protect you. I guess we're about to find out. The rest of the day passed in a blur of careful preparation. I created multiple backups of all evidence, storing them in secure locations, both physical and digital. I drafted my report to the SEC, making sure to cite the specific provision that gave me the authority to bypass internal channels. And I began the delicate process of protecting myself against the retaliation I knew was coming. It came sooner than expected. The next morning, I arrived to find my keycard deactivated. The security guard, Marcus, looked embarrassed as he called up to verify. "I'm sorry, Dr. Hale, there seems to be some confusion. Mr. Bryson wants to see you in the main conference room." The main conference room, where public executions were held. I straightened my jacket and walked through the lobby like I owned the place. If Cameron wanted a show, I'd give him one. The conference room was packed. The entire senior leadership team was there, along with several people I didn't recognize, outside consultants. Most likely, Cameron stood at the head of the table, a look of theatrical disappointment on his face. "Veronica," he said as I entered, "please, have a seat." I remained standing. "I prefer to stand, thanks." His jaw tightened slightly. "As you wish. I'm afraid we have a serious problem. It's come to my attention that someone has been accessing confidential financial records without authorization, downloading sensitive data, creating what could only be described as a malicious interpretation of our financial operations." Is that what we're calling compliance reviews now? Malicious interpretations? A ripple of discomfort went through the room. Good. Let them squirm. Cameron's smile was all teeth. "See, that's the problem. Veronica, you've overstepped, gone beyond compliance into what looks suspiciously like corporate espionage, industrial sabotage, even. That's a serious accusation." "Yes, it is. Which is why I've asked our friends from Brennan and Associates to conduct an independent investigation." He gestured to the strangers in the room. "They'll need access to all your files, your computers, your records, full cooperation. I'm sure you understand." Brennan and Associates. I knew the firm by reputation, corporate fixers who specialized in making problems disappear. The fact that Cameron had brought them in told me everything I needed to know about how this was going to play. "Of course," I said smoothly. "I have nothing to hide, though I should mention that all my work product is protected under attorney-client privilege through the legal department. Mr. Quinn can coordinate access." Cameron's smile faltered slightly. He hadn't expected me to invoke legal protection so quickly. "I'm afraid Anders is no longer handling this matter. He's decided to take some personal time. Family emergency." I felt a chill run down my spine. Anders didn't have family. Integra. Trust was his life. They'd neutralized my only ally. "How convenient," I said. "Isn't it?" Cameron's mask finally slipped, revealing the predator underneath. "Here's what's going to happen. Veronica, you're going to take a leave of absence, effective immediately. During that time, you'll cooperate fully with our investigation. If you're cleared, and that's a big if, we'll discuss your future with the company. If not, let me guess, you'll pursue criminal charges for the corporate espionage I didn't commit." "Oh, I think we'll find plenty of evidence. Amazing what turns up when you look hard enough." He leaned forward. "Or you could make this easy. Resign. Sign a nice, comprehensive NDA. We'll even throw in a year's severance. You can go teach at some university, write academic papers, live a nice, quiet life." "And if I refuse?" His smile returned, cold as winter. "Then you'll learn what it's like to go up against someone with unlimited resources and very few scruples. I will destroy you, Veronica, personally, professionally, financially. By the time I'm done, you won't be able to get a job auditing a lemonade stand." The room was dead silent. Everyone was watching to see what I'd do. I reached into my jacket pocket, and several people tensed, but I only pulled out my phone. "You know what I love about modern technology," I said conversationally. "Everything leaves a trail, every email, every transaction, every authorization. It's all there, waiting to tell its story." I tapped my phone screen. "For instance, did you know that our corporate email system automatically backs up to a secure, off-site server, one that IT doesn't even have access to? It's part of our SEC compliance requirements. Sarbanes-Oxley is a beautiful thing." Cameron's face had gone pale. "You're bluffing," Tell me. Cameron, when you authorized the transfer of $3.2 million to Cascade Holdings last Tuesday, did you know that Cascade is a shell company registered in the Caymans, or that the ultimate beneficiary is another shell that traces back to a certain numbered account in Switzerland? You can't prove... Can't I? I held up my phone. It's all here. Every transaction, every diverted payment, every infrastructure project that received a fraction of its allocated funding while the rest disappeared into your maze of shell companies. Even if that were true, which it's not, you'd be admitting to unauthorized access to confidential records. That's a federal crime. Not when it's done under the authority of Section 47, subsection 3A of our corporate charter, the break glass provision, which I invoked yesterday at 4:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as recorded in our compliance log. I watched understanding dawn on his face. He'd been so focused on building walls around me that he'd never considered I might already be over them. You sent it already. It wasn't a question. The SEC, the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, and the Inspector General's offices for 3 different federal departments. They should be receiving my comprehensive report right about... I glanced at my watch. Now. The room erupted. Several of the senior leaders were on their phones, presumably calling their lawyers. The Brennan and Associates team was huddled in urgent conference, and Cameron just stared at me with undisguised hatred. You have no idea what you've done, he said quietly. I've done my job. The job you hired me to do, ironically enough. This company will be destroyed. Thousands of people will lose their jobs. That's on you, not me. You could have run Integra Trust honestly. You could have used those funds for their intended purpose. You chose differently. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Dr. Hale, this is Special Agent Martinez with the FBI. We've received your report. Please remain available. We'll be in touch within the hour. I showed Cameron the screen. Looks like my ride is here. I turned to leave, then paused at the door. Oh, one more thing. You might want to check your accounts. All of them. The SEC has this neat little trick where they can freeze assets when there's probable cause of securities fraud. Something about preventing the dissipation of ill-gotten gains. His phone rang. He answered it, his face cycling through expressions: confusion, disbelief, then pure rage. What do you mean? Frozen, all of them. That's impossible. But it wasn't impossible. It was standard procedure when dealing with fraud of this magnitude. Every account touched by the dirty money would be locked down until the investigation was complete. Not just corporate accounts, personal ones too. Cameron Bryson, who'd probably never worried about money in his life, was about to learn what it felt like to have his assets frozen. I left him screaming into his phone and walked out of Integra Trust Holdings for what I knew would be the last time. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. FBI interviews, SEC depositions, grand jury testimony. The media got wind of the story, and suddenly Integra Trust was front-page news. Infrastructure billions diverted in massive fraud scheme, read one headline. CEO arrested as Integrat Trust scandal deepens, read another. Cameron tried to fight back, of course. His lawyers painted me as a disgruntled employee with a vendetta. They suggested I'd manipulated data, taken things out of context, maybe even planted evidence. But the beautiful thing about financial crimes is that numbers don't lie. Every transaction I'd flagged was verified by forensic accountants. Every shell company was traced to its source. The evidence was overwhelming. Within a month, Cameron Bryson was under federal indictment on 47 counts of wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. His assets remained frozen as the investigation expanded to include his network of co-conspirators. Several board members resigned in disgrace. Others cut deals to testify against him. Integra Trust itself entered a consent decree with the SEC. A court-appointed monitor took over operations. Surprisingly, the company survived, though significantly downsized and under new management. The infrastructure projects that had been shortchanged received emergency funding to complete critical repairs. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. As for me, Cameron had been right about one thing: my career in corporate compliance was effectively over. No company wanted to hire the woman who'd brought down Integra Trust, no matter how justified my actions had been. Whistleblowers, even successful ones, are rarely welcomed with open arms. But the SEC had other ideas. We need people like you, Deputy Director Sarah Chen told me over coffee 6 weeks after the indictments. People who understand how these schemes work from the inside, who aren't afraid to do the right thing when it matters. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a chance to make sure this doesn't happen again. We're forming a new task force focused on infrastructure fraud. Public-private partnerships are the future, but they're also vulnerable to exactly the kind of manipulation you uncovered. We need someone to help us build better safeguards. I thought about all the bridges that might collapse, the hospitals that might fail, the water systems that might poison communities if the money meant to maintain them was stolen. When do I start? That was 3 years ago. Since then, our task force has uncovered similar schemes in 12 different companies, recovering nearly $1 billion in diverted funds. We've developed new forensic techniques, established better oversight protocols, and trained hundreds of compliance officers to spot the warning signs. Cameron Bryson is serving 25 years in federal prison. He still maintains his innocence, still claims I orchestrated his downfall out of personal animosity. But his former colleagues have been very cooperative in exchange for reduced sentences, and their testimony paints a clear picture of a man who thought he was too smart to get caught. I sometimes think about that night in my office, staring at those spreadsheets, realizing the scope of what I'd discovered. I could have looked the other way, could have taken Cameron's offer of a quiet resignation and generous severance, could have prioritized my career over my conscience. But then I remember why I got into compliance in the first place. It wasn't for the money or the prestige. It was because I believed that companies could do well by doing right. That integrity mattered, that someone needed to stand guard against those who would abuse the system for personal gain. My new office doesn't have the spectacular view of my old one at Integra Trust. It's a standard government building, all fluorescent lights and gray cubicles, but on my desk is a framed photo, a bridge in Minnesota, newly repaired with funds recovered from one of our investigations. A small plaque on the bridge reads, "Maintained with integrity." That's worth more than any corner office. The game continues, of course. For every scheme we uncover, clever people are devising new ones. For every Cameron Bryson we stop, another is learning from his mistakes, building better mousetraps. It's an endless cycle of innovation in financial crime. But we're getting better too. Each case teaches us something new. Each victory makes the next one a little easier. And sometimes, late at night when I'm reviewing suspicious transactions or untangling shell company networks, I allow myself a small smile. They all think we're bluffing, right up until their assets are frozen. And that beautiful moment when they realize the paper tiger has real teeth, makes everything worthwhile. Because in the end, it's not about revenge or personal satisfaction. It's about the millions of people who depend on the infrastructure we're protecting, the families who drive across bridges expecting them to hold, the patients who trust that hospital generators will work when the power fails, the communities that turn on their taps expecting clean water. They'll never know how close they came to disaster. They'll never know about the diverted millions or the safety inspections that almost didn't happen, and that's fine. The best victories are the disasters that don't occur, the headlines that never get written. My phone buzzes with a new case file, another company, another suspicious pattern of transactions. Time to get to work. After all, someone has to keep them honest. And if they think I'm bluffing, well, they'll learn soon enough. They always do.